Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the AgView Pitch. This is going to be a quick one, but we do have some breaking news. We have with us today Paul Neiffer. Paul, how's it going?
Doing great, getting ready to go play some pickleball. So
Uh,
hopefully I don't get injured. So
yeah, awesome. Well, typically we don't jump in with stuff, but there is some kind of big news. Talk a little bit about what the listeners need to pay attention to right now.
yeah, so both the House and the Senate, as we tape this, both the House and the Senate have passed the continuing resolution. We know that President Biden is going to go ahead and sign it. So this is the law. There's 30.78 billion of both disaster aid and economic assistance that's going to be provided for ag. On the economic assistance, it's about 10 billion, and then the remainder would be disaster aid. Now, we'll spend most of the time talking about the economic assistance today, but over on the disaster aid, they allocated about 18 to 19 billion for what I call 23 and 24 disasters. So like Chris, you and I know in our 23 crop that we had some drought,
Hmm.
that likely under the ERP provisions, which we think is what USDA will implement, that, for us personally, because I know in Washington I had drought, in Missouri I had a windstorm, and in Iowa I had a drought. So I would qualify for that disaster aid for 23. Now 24, I had good crops, so I'm probably not going to get anything, but it's going to be similar to 2020 and 21 ERP. Now, the benefit too is some farmers were getting penalized on the 22 ERP because they weren't able to insure all their acres. They might have had 3 acres that for whatever reasons they couldn't be insured. So they got penalized. They couldn't get a payment at the 90% level. They got it at the 70% level. This continuing resolution has a provision that says you can have de minimis acres. Now, USDA is going to calculate what is de minimis, but you can have de minimis acres that are not covered by insurance, and you're still going to get paid at that 90% level or up to the 90% level. So that part is good on the aid. Now, specifically, there is 2 billion that's set aside for livestock. So, the livestock type disaster aid is going to be there too. So you got 2 billion for livestock. There's another couple billion that's for various programs, just refunding, replenishing those programs. There's also for small states. I think it's like Delaware, Connecticut, Rhode Island, that USDA will provide about 250 billion of aid to them, and then the state will actually come up with their program. But the key one for our farmers that are listing on here, on the disaster aid side, there's about 20 billion that over the next few months is going to be sent out to farmers. Before I go on the economic side, anything you wanted to ask me
Yeah,
on that, Chris?
yeah, I do. So from the disaster, I mean, obviously, like you said, we had quite a few clients last year that were in a drought zone in 23. So you pretty confident that there's going to be some sort of compensation there then for those that were in that drought zone.
Yeah, I think for those that collected crop insurance, they'll get topped up like they did on the 2020 and 21 ERP. So instead of being a calculate, so let's say they had 80% insurance, USDA will recalculate as if they had 95%, so you
And
get
if
that
they
extra
were and if they were
15%.
eight and if they were 85, and does that go off just the regular revenue protection? That doesn't include any of the other buy-ups or anything?
As far as I know, it's just on the revenue protection. I don't know if SCO and ECOs are included. My memory is it was more just based on the original,
Regular RP.
the regular RP. Now, also there is, I'm not sure, there was 30 million that was set aside for reimbursement of crop insurance. Now, I wasn't sure if I think that may be more related to the crop insurance provider than it is for the farmer. So I think also they'll get their crop insurance premiums reimbursed too.
Hmm.
So,
And
so
those who had excellent crops in 23 don't plan on disaster payment.
correct. But
Okay.
if they had so like southern Minnesota in 24 or northwest Iowa, they got rained out and you had crappy yields and so on,
But that's a
likely
24. That'd be disaster for the 24 crop.
you're right. But remember, you're going to get about 8 to 9 billion for 23 and 8 to 9 billion for 24.
Okay.
So this is a 23 and a 24 disaster aid relief. So, this is not the first time because we had 20 and 21, but you're going to get both 23 or 24 depending on your situation. And many farmers will qualify for both, and several farmers won't qualify for anything because they had
Mhm.
good crops on both years.
Right. Okay. So I think that kind of for now, at least, gives us a pretty good idea on the disaster side. Talk a little bit about the economic side,
Yeah.
and is that
The-
the 10 billion that's been talked about a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. So again, I'm a CPA, I'm a number nerd. So this is actually the fun stuff for me. So yeah, I basically call it the Farm Act Part Two. Remember back in October, I think it was October 18th, we had the Farm Act, the original Farm Act that was introduced. And that payment was based on a 60%. So you calculated the damage and then you got 60%. This payment is now calculated based on 26%. So it's dropped about in half. However, on top of it, they added in a minimum payment, and that minimum payment is essentially 8% of the reference price from 2014. So like in corn, $3.70 times 8%, what would that be? Like 30 cents roughly,
Mhm.
times the current 2024 PLC yield. Like on corn, I think that minimum was like $42.35. The actual calculated payment amount, again, this could change a little bit because USDA still has to go through the formulas, is 43.80. So I think what I'll do is just I'll go through some of the major crops as far as the payments that we know. Corn, you're going to get 43.80 per acre. Now, this doesn't matter if your APH is 250 or your APH is 50. You're going to get 43.80 per acre. And I already know some people are saying, "Hey, my APH is 250. Why aren't I getting a larger payment?" Well, you have a higher payment. I mean, you have a higher APH, so you might be making more money than that farmer with 50,
Right.
so they
Right.
didn't reallocate based on APH. Now, soybeans is at 30.61, wheat is at 31.80, cotton is at 84.70, rice for long and medium is at 71.37, sorghum is at 41.85, oats is 78.40, barley is 21.76, and then peanuts is 76.30. We sort of know those numbers right now, plus or minus a few cents for the final numbers. Now, barley, interesting, when you went through the calculation that was in the law, they would get no payment, but because of this minimum, they get the 21.76. Now, the other Title One, and this is only for Title One, so it's not for fruits and vegetables. This economic assistance is strictly for Title One. So you have dry peas, lentils, chickpeas, rapeseed, canola, safflower, and so on. Those minimum payments, the low is sesame at $5 an acre, but most of those payments are going to be between $15 and $25 per acre minimum. The
Hmm.
actual calculated amount, because USDA has to go through and calculate those payments, might be higher. So I think most farmers that grow Title One crops are, what we were talking about. Now, the acres that you get is the acres that you planted in 2024 and plus 50% of any confirmed prevent planted acres. So if you planted 2,000 acres and you're a corn and soybean 50-50 corn and soybean farmer, yeah, 2,000 acres, you're going to get about $60,000 of aid. So I'll just hesitate. We'll go into the payment limits and some of that stuff here in a second.
So I have a question on the payment limits, which is I'm going to jump to right away, is
Okay.
getting a disaster payment that amounts to a fairly sizable number, and then you're getting this other payment.
Separate payment limits. So you're not going to be
Okay.
curtailed.
So
It's a
20.
completely separate
Okay.
payment limit. So economic aid will have its own payment limit. 23 I'm going to call 23 ERP own payment limit, 24 ERP own payment limit. So
Okay. So you could so an entity could get up to 125,000 on this economic, you know.
well, technically they could get up to 250,000. So let's cover
It,
that right now.
okay.
So the regular payment limit, if your farm gross receipts, not AGI, not
Okay.
after
Yep.
expenses. So
Gross.
before expenses, your gross receipt, if it exceeds 75% of total gross receipts, then your payment limit goes up to 250,000.
Hmm.
So, but if you're under, that 75% level, then you only get the 125,000. So for most farmers that are Schedule F farmer or general partnership, LLC, S corporation, in my opinion, probably likely going to be pretty easy to meet that double payment limit. Now, you're not going to get a double payment. I've already had that question multiple times. Well, if I qualify, I'm going to get twice the payments. No, you just have a higher payment limit. So if
Right.
your calculated payments on 125,000, this is irrelevant. Don't worry about it. But if you're over that number, then it's important. Now, C corps are typically pretty easy to meet that payment limit, but then you got to look at each of the owners likely. You have to look at the owners and then you have to determine whether they are a farmer or not. So
Right.
the wages that get paid from that C corporation, that qualifies as farm income. So that's helpful, but a lot of them have spouses that work outside the farm. They work for a hospital or a school district. That income's not going to be farm income. So they may or may not qualify for that full extra payment limit.
Hmm. Okay. So what else do we need to know, I guess, on as far as limits or any other details?
Yeah, I think that's the key. Obviously we know what the estimate amounts are. The final amounts are going to be determined by USDA. So don't hang your hat on that these are the actual numbers. But I based on what we know, I think we're pretty close. Um, USDA is required to pay this within 90 days of signing of the act. So they have to have it paid by around March 20th. Some people were saying, well, is it going to be paid in 24? No, there's no way the USDA in the next 10 days can get all the details worked out on this. I mean, they still have to go through and calculate the actual payment calculation for all these other Title ones that are not in the actual CR as far as the formula. So they still have to do that. So I think we're going to get an extra 10 billion of economic assistance. Is it enough? Well, I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but I mean, farmers definitely made a whole lot of extra money in 22 just because of the Ukraine crisis. I mean, I'll go back to the Bible. We have 7 lean years followed by, or 7 good years followed by 7 lean years.
Hmm.
We maybe should have known that this was coming, maybe not to the degree it's come, but we need to,
Yeah, kind of
so
get.
that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah,
So,
right.
so
Yeah, I think this will soften the blow a little bit for a lot of operations. I think I would agree wholeheartedly that it's not a fix, but
no, no, no.
and the other frustrating thing, this is another podcast too, but is that, we can take these funds and we need to, but a fair amount of those dollars go right through the producer's hand, right into everybody else's hand in the
Yeah,
industry,
yeah,
So, I mean, I think typically what we've seen, at least over the years, whenever those funds, those ad hoc payments show up, usually the farmer keeps somewhere to the tune of about 30% of it, and the other 70% flows right through the system
yeah,
in
yeah.
all the other categories, whether it's interest rates or land rents and inputs.
Inputs and
Right.
equipment,
Yep. Yep.
equipment. So yeah,
Yep. So
yeah,
I think it's a good thing to an extent, but it's one of those catch 22 deals, but I think you're right. When we have good times, we got to make sure we're preparing for the difficult ones for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Give you the last word here, and we'll wrap this up.
I think the last word is that Congress is dysfunctional. We're going to see, in the next 6 months, a lot of things that need to be done, and it's going to be interesting to see if it's how well it's done. Oh, I guess the one last word, and I think you'll put it in the show notes and so on. But I am providing a free webinar on my blog site, farmcpareport.com. So just go to farmcpareport.com. That will be posted early Monday morning. It is a free webinar. It's about a 20-minute webinar, and I provide a slideshow that goes into more details than we covered on this. But for those that would like to take a look at that, I would certainly suggest that they go over to my blog, farmcpareport.com, and take a look at it there.
Awesome. We'll do, and we'll put that link in the. I'll Mac put that in the show notes there too. But hey, Paul, as usual, you're on it, man. Really appreciate it. You do a huge service to producers, and just on behalf of the producers, thank you for all you do because it's a big deal. So
Well, and I wish everyone out there a Merry Christmas, and we'll hopefully have a happy, good New Year. This will maybe be a little bit of a start on it. So
yeah, I think it's a Christmas present probably for a lot of producers, and it'll definitely help, and it's going to ease the lenders' minds a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah.
I'm
Th-
gonna
This
I'm
this is more of a Christmas present for the lenders maybe than
it,
than the producers.
yeah, I think it's peace of mind a little bit for them, but I am definitely going to get a couple lenders' opinions on here next week on this topic because the question I have is this is this is income that is going to come in 25. Do you show that on the balance sheet as a receivable or not?
Yeah, yeah.
Not that that's a
Well,
huge
I
deal, but
I think technically since it was passed in 24, I mean, at year end, you probably could be showing it as a receivable, but I would be interested to see how lenders, I know lenders, I've talked to some lenders or have seen comments on many lenders that they've taken the Farm Act number and sort of factored that in as far as their renewal. So now you're going to have to tweak
Mhm.
that down by about 50%. So we'll see
Yeah,
how that affects some of those renewals.
yeah, it'll be interesting to get some opinions on get two or three lenders on here and let them arm wrestle or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds good. All right. Well, hey again, Paul, thank you very much. You need to go play pickleball, so have
I,
fun.
I will. Thanks, Chris.
See you later.
See ya.
Yeah, bye.